to peruse the meeting minutes from November. We had a very good discussion on transportation, which I think is going to have more attention by our group paid to it, I think. Can I get a motion to, first of all, are there any comments or questions or objections to any of the meeting minutes? All right.
I'll move. A second.
Good. Second. All right. Motion carries. Oh, wait. As you know, I am a master of Robert's rule.
An experienced parliamentarian, yeah.
So can I get a vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ally, thank you. I'll now move on to the chair's report. I'm very excited to introduce our newest commissioner, Betsy France. Betsy is very well known to some of you, maybe not to everyone. Betsy currently serves for the nonprofit Path Forward, which is the shelter for individual homeless people in Arlington. You may better be familiar with ASPAN. That was his former name. Prior to that, or her current position, she was the CEO of the Virginia Hospital Foundation. And prior to that, you may know her as the founder and CEO of what was Leadership Arlington, which is now called the Leadership Center for Excellence. She did that for 21 years. So I'll have to say that your appointment, Betsy, is quite gratifying to me, since my path to community service actually began with your giving me the opportunity to be on the class of 2017. So you bring a wealth of insight, I think. I'd like you to take an opportunity to say hello, and if you have any comment.
Thank you, Bill. I'm really excited to be here, and it is an honor and a privilege to serve on this commission. I look forward to reconnecting with many of you and getting to know those I don't know and participating.
Look forward to it. I know you'll find Betsy listens intently. She's thoughtful. She's very intentional. Her comments are measured. And so I wish you well. I wish our terms overlapped, but so be it. Maybe that's appropriate. I'm going to keep the chair's report short. I will say that it's a sad day for me. After 7 years, I'm going to be rolling off off of this commission. And I also want to recognize Scott Pedowitz will be also rolling off. We both served 7 years, and Scott has been an invaluable asset to this commission. So we're going to hold that thought. We got more to say about this towards the end of the meeting.
We're going to save the tears for the
end. So I'm going to move it over to you, Ryan, for the director's report.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. I'm also going to keep this relatively brief. And Bill, I'm going to just roll in after my one comment into the introductions and get the presentation started. Is that okay with you?
Please.
All right, great. So just a few, one major update to share. Since the last time we met, the county board on November 16th approved a new policy on the transformation of commercial office buildings in Arlington and associated changes to the Arlington County zoning ordinance. In short, to put a new review process in place for the conversion of office buildings into other uses. And this is by no means a small feat. This was 11 months of work led by AED staff and staff from CPHD with very strong support and engagement from the commercial market vacancy work group that Scott led and others on this commission. And so I want to thank Kevin for your testimony at the hearing, It's always great when the board is trying to find questions and comments to talk about, to keep kind of like make it, because it was such an easy decision for them. So we're very excited. I want to really thank Mark McCulley on our team, who was the co-lead. Mark used every bit of his wisdom and knowledge of county process to get this through, and collaborated really well with our team at CPHD. And so thank you to Mark. And finally, just kind of where are we with this? So now that this is approved, we have to finalize administrative regulations so we can begin to accept applications. And we've stated that we want to have that in place by December 31st of this year. So that way projects can roll in. There's some tax benefits to that as well, but we will have at least something where someone can say, I'd like to do this, and we will accept it by December 31st. There's lots more details that need to be worked out on that. So really, again, thank you to this commission for the support, and thank you to all of our partners for the support. I also wanted, speaking of partners, to just acknowledge that Danette Wynn, the new CEO of the Boston Bid, is here with us today. Danette, thank you very much for joining us on your first week. Danette and I worked previously together when she was with Fairfax City Economic Development, and I encourage you all to get to know her in the coming months and years. Lastly, Caitlin is going to send out a new series of invites for the 2025 meeting. So there's going to be just some logistical things that will be coming your way. And before we go into introductions, I guess I'll just ask if there's any questions or comments that I can address before we get started with today's program.
How does the new Fuse building look?
Looks very good.
Yeah.
It is still kind of being built out. Fuse, George Mason's new innovation campus, the commercial opening was last Friday. So they're able to now accept tenants in that building. The academic piece is going to roll on next year. But it's a very, very cool building. And when
Can
you
you
get
describe a little bit about what's in it?
Yeah, so basically it's split between academic space and then space for industry partners. And both will be able to use lab space that's there. There's secured, also known as SCIF space in the building, where you can do classified work. There's just general offices and workspaces for private sector tenants to occupy, and classroom space. And in the middle, they have a drone atrium where they can literally fly drones inside the building to do testing and stuff. So it's pretty fascinating. The main focus will be around technologies, areas of robotics, AI, AR and VR, and various other things that, as a government major, I have no idea. And Mason alum, I cannot describe to you in any detail. But it was very exciting, and they already are seeing leasing activity in the building, which is great. And I suspect that in early next year, we'll hear some announcements from the Edgemore team about tenants who will be occupying the building. So very exciting to have that addition to the neighborhood and the local ecosystem. Okay, today we're gonna have a presentation from our Business Investment Group, or BIG staff. So since I came here, we've been talking a lot about, we kind of often refer to it as supply and demand. So oversupply of obsolete office buildings. How do we drive new tenant demand in the market? And we spent a lot of time on the supply side of things over the last 2 years. So today you're going to get an insight into how we're helping to drive demand into our office buildings through our business investment team. And this team really kind of focuses on three main areas. It's kind of that traditional traded sector, attraction and retention, technology and the tech ecosystem. And then we're kind of beginning to bleed into developing our international development programs. And so these are directly tied to goal 1 and 3 of our new strategic plan. And I really have to commend Michael Stiefvater, who leads the Business Investment Group, who is actually on vacation this week, because he's been able to develop a new strategy that really reflects where we are today. So under previous directors, pre-pandemic, the BIG group was really set up to capture those large office projects like your Amazons and your Nestle's and so on. And this team, because that pipeline has diminished so much, this team has really had to reinvent themselves. And I credit Michael and the team for coming up with this new strategy that you're going to hear about today. They've had great success already this year, helping to assist with the facilitation of leasing of office space and the creation of new jobs, which is their key metrics. But you'll probably hear today and over the course of time, you'll hear about how those metrics are evolving and changing, given the changing economy that we are facing. So today you're going to hear, in Michael's absence, you're going to hear from Brandon and Adriana, who are assistant directors, and they'll introduce themselves. And then Tally Wolf, who is our startup ecosystem manager, will facilitate the panel discussion that will follow. All right, over to the team.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Brandon Bedford. I am the Assistant Director for Business Intelligence within the Business Investment Group. And today we're here to give you a brief overview of what we do. So this is, we're going to start by talking about what we do as a whole as BIG, followed by our traditional attraction services, what we do in retention and expansion, and then the innovation ecosystem stuff. So really, this is kind of the thesis of what we do within Arlington, within BIG, is we support Arlington's economic growth by driving innovation to generate demand for office space, create jobs, and cultivate a dynamic business ecosystem through the attraction, retention, and expansion of businesses. So this is our org chart here. There are 9 of us. I'm acting director today, but Michael Stiefvater is typically director. I'm assistant director along with Adriana, and then we have Troy, Melissa, Tally, Cindy, Smeet, and Megan that make up our team. And for the sake of time, we're going to move forward, but feel free to ask questions if you have specific questions on what any one of us do. Excellent. So as far as business services, I would like to refer to this more as a tasting menu rather than a cookbook of what we do. So really, there's a lot of things that we do for businesses, some of which include business to business and university connections, working with partners like you, like Virginia Tech Innovation, like employers we already know, to help businesses be plugged into what's happening in our community. Also business intelligence, the side that I oversee. We can help you with market research, with real estate options, like really seeing like what the value proposition is in Arlington for your business. Liaison services as well. We do a lot of that working with whether it's CTHD, working with our workforce group for workforce needs. We work all throughout the county and as well as with regional partners to help problem solve for businesses. We also have historically done some relocation services. When Nestle moved here from California in 2018, we actually had some people develop programming to engage employees in California and relocating to Northern Virginia. And about 40% of employees actually did, which was way beyond what Nestle expected. So that was a really good success story that we can, definitely deploy in the future if needed. And then site selection services, like that's really kind of the bread and butter of what we do, is helping companies figure out the space. And while our pipeline has dried up, that still is the ultimate goal, is to get people into space to generate more tax revenue. Next slide. So, and then these are kind of the key industries that we focus on. And when I say key industries, I think we look at key industries in a lot of different ways. I think this isn't necessarily the same as AED's strategic key industries. This is more key industries as is reflected in our market pipeline. Because there are some industries that are more that like we have a good propensity for in our strategic plan that we haven't quite seen reflected in the market. So as far as what we're seeing more of in the market is advanced computing, aerospace and defense tech, cybersecurity, government contracting, nonprofits and associations, and professional services. And for the sake of time, if you have any more questions on these, happy to dive into those later. And then these are FY25 metrics. Square footage is kind of the standard for any economic development entity, as well as jobs, But we've also started expanding more into thinking about, okay, if there's not a lot of pipeline out there, like how else are we really demonstrating value? We're demonstrating value through our BRE activities. So about with 700 touch points with businesses in Arlington that are either to retain or to help expand. Also attraction outreaches, and then tech ecosystem partner meetings. This is where a lot of our newer efforts are, diving in to make sure that like Arlington continues, maintains its position as the geographical epicenter of our tech everything, workforce investments, all of it in Metro Washington. So I will hand it over to Adriana now. Oh, and also we are over halfway towards meeting all of these goals for this year. So we're actually going to have to increase them for next year.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Some of you already I know and I have met, and others I haven't had the pleasure yet. My name is Adriana Bonilla. I'm Assistant Director for Business Development. I joined AAD nearly a year ago, so it's a pleasure to contribute here to the community. And before that, I spent over 16 years at the Organization of American States near the White House. And so I'm happy to bring that expertise and connections here to our work. So when Brandon was referring to our 300 outreaches to companies, I want to point out that our very targeted outreaches are. So we reach out to companies based on a criteria, companies that are growing for the past 2 years, companies that are aligned with our main industries, companies that maybe have raised capital, so they have a strength to exploring Arlington as a business location. And on top of that 300, we also engage with business partners throughout the world. And so that is not contemplated the 300. So it's actually much higher number. So next one. So on top of having kind of these campaigns toward countries, and I'm quickly pointing out, right now we are carrying out a very active campaign towards UK companies. We are also doing a campaign towards Canada, especially to Toronto, and we're also building a campaign to giving outreach to companies in Germany. So what else do we do in the business attraction front? So we use multiplier effect mechanisms that allow us to extend our impact. So one, we are really looking into accelerators. We want to bring accelerators to the region to amplify that impact. So an example is Starburst Aerospace. We are happy to share with you, and maybe some of you already know, Starburst will open in National Landing in 2025. And so it's a global leader of aerospace and defense, a startup accelerator. Companies go through their acceleration process, and these fully vetted companies are ready to be presented to investors. So we really look this as an anchor. We're also emphasizing a lot venture capital. So we are doing an attraction campaign. We want to bring more VCs to the areas. We know that startups gravitate toward capital. So we want to make sure that innovation and the startup ecosystem is booming. And on that front, we also created a defense tech working group. So what it means is we are bringing those VCs investing into defense tech companies to make sure that we understand what else do they need. How can we facilitate connections, and how can we make sure that there's economic growth and mutual benefit for everyone? On the international side, we are leveraging partnerships throughout the world, and I will provide more details in the next slide. And the innovation, and something that Ryan was referring, so we have the Fuse building that opened last Friday. It's an innovation hub, and Virginia Tech Campus will open in February 2025. We see these innovation anchors that AAD also supports as part of the magnets that attract business and innovation and dynamism. And on top of that, we are also working towards a national landing hub. So exploring innovation district kind of mechanisms to bring together stakeholders on key industries to make sure that our county continues being very vibrant. So very quickly on the international work, I wish we had more time to present, but as Brandon was mentioning, we will be happy to provide further details or ask any questions. So very quickly, this 2024, when I started and we were doing a plan with the team, we wanted to make sure that Arlington was connected with as many countries as possible. We wanted to build bridges and connections and have ambassadors of Arlington in different parts of the world, even if it's a university or even if it's a private sector company or a public official. We wanted to have people and voices that can talk about Arlington. So we are pleased to report that as of now, we have over 20 countries in which we have engagements. Additionally, we have created 60 new connections with business stakeholder relationships. So example, we work very closely with the German delegation of industry and commerce. And this evening, I'm going to a reception with companies that came from Germany on the education sector. We are also very active and proactive in getting with cooperation networks. So Arlington joined in May the America's Competitiveness Exchange. It's a federal government program, and it really creates high-level decision makers throughout the world and also in the Western Hemisphere. So why the networks are important is because it gives Arlington a platform for continuous engagement. And so within the America's Competitiveness Exchange, we have access to over 1,000 high-level decision makers in different parts of the regions and countries. And also, we are very excited about vehicles for continuous engagement. We were thinking, okay, if we reach out to companies, what can we offer? We cannot only just talk about Arlington. We want to offer something. So we created and start designing with the team a soft landing program that we are calling Arlington Tech Launchpad. And we're excited that we will be ready to launch on January 2025. So if you have any questions, we can provide. And Select USA on the previous slide, but you can stay in this one, is the largest investment summit of the US happening every year in Washington, DC. We are also using that main attraction event that brings together over 2,500 companies and private sector leaders from the world. And so we're using Select USA as well. So notable attraction successes in 2024, just pointing out quickly, 2U, former EdTech unicorn, relocated from Lanham, Maryland to National Landing, where they occupy 30,000 square feet and is closer to a tech hub. Also, CoStar Group, as you may already know, real estate data and marketplace company, relocated from Washington, DC, and will start operations in Roslyn in 2025, and will employ 650 workers, 500 that will be relocated and 150 that will be new jobs. And GTT Communications and Networking Security, that service provider for multilateral organization, is also very much like growing, and it came from Fairfax County to Arlington, to Boston area, and will occupy 8,000 square feet. So what we do in business retention and expansion, several activities, that we do with the team, but maybe just quickly listing them. And if you have any other questions, happy to respond after this presentation. So we develop a list of over 60 larger employers. And so we reach out to them and we meet with them and understand their challenges, their opportunities, and make sure that the companies are healthy. We also continuously update a fast-growing list of companies. We want to see which are the sectors that are growing, which are the companies that are really creating employment, and how can we leverage those companies and understand why are they growing and how can we benefit others from certain resources or things. We also take quarterly, we do an exercise of getting expiring lease reports. So we want to go over the list and we identify, okay, which are the companies we need to call and outreach, and then that's the way also that we understand, okay, are they renovating in the building? Are they gonna move? What do we do, right? And in many cases are also an opportunity for us to give them ways of expansion. We also invite the companies to current programming, also as speakers, high-level engagements. We normally provide the names of our companies to award nominations in several events. And jointly with Biz Launch, we created LaTech to empower some Latino top entrepreneurs that have technologies that can scale. And so they can influence the entire kind of tech ecosystem in Arlington. Next. And my last slide, I'm talking also about some kind of expansion, notable expansion successes in 2024. We have enterprise knowledge. So we are pleased that is a homegrown IT consulting firm that helps organizations capture and manage knowledge to make it very efficient. And so they doubled their headquarters in Clarendon from 6,000 to 12,000 square feet. Lovelytics is also a homegrown consulting firm, so it's positive. It shows very good signs of the ecosystem, and it's dedicating to unlocking transformative data of pervert data, generative AI, machine learning. And so Roslyn headquarters and expanded from 5,000 to 8,883 square feet. And then Venture Global, LNG, liquid natural gas provider, purchased the building of 133 million and expanded the footprint from 7,000 to 94,744. So as you see, there's many more other examples and things that I wanted maybe to share with you, but we know it's short in time. So thank you for the opportunity to share these details with you. I'm looking forward for our engagement. So passing again back to Brent.
Sure. And I heard some applause, so I'll keep it brief. Excellent.
Please.
So really, this is just going to hit the highlights on a lot of the work we've done on the innovation ecosystem. This is another tasting menu that I've referenced before, kind of looking at how we help startups overall. And more specifically, I think what really differentiates Arlington from other communities, I recently gave this presentation in New York City alongside NYC EDC. And in NYC EDC, they have this overwhelming deck with all of these different things because the EDC up there, they own 66 million square feet of real estate and they do all kinds of other stuff that's like larger than life. But what makes us unique is that we're small enough to where we can actually get to know companies more one-on-one, to where you kind of know our team on a texting basis in a way that wouldn't be possible in an NYC EDC or even like DC or other communities. So it really creates this level of personalization that we don't have to like think through how we package every single service because we can kind of just like meet you where you're at, which I think is really incredible. Next slide, please. This is a quote about how we help startups. So next slide. Let's see. Okay. And then Arlington Innovation Fund, I think we've talked about that a lot in here, but really the focus is homegrown pipeline, ecosystem building, increasing recognition of Arlington as a destination and a hub for startups, and funding access. Next slide. So these are some of the grantees from AIF, Genlog Seamless Transition Prize. Genlogs has, since they received their first grant award, they've hired 11 FTEs and gone on to do 6.4 million in additional fundraising, which is pretty impressive in 6 months for a startup. And additionally, Seamless Transition, they've been doing field testing in Ukraine. They've been looking for lab space in Arlington. They also have gotten FDA approval to sell medical devices abroad. So a lot of great progress there. Prize has signed several major clients and is also saying after their next major client, they will probably need an office space. So, hey, that's pretty big. And they are a LaTech initiative partner. And then the next slide. So we do a lot of community building as well as our direct to company grants. So we have in some way supported over 50 ecosystem building events, including Citrine Angels, including, oh my gosh, there's so many. I'm keeping it short. 2,200 attendees in these events, and over 275 startups have attended our events or received support from us in some way. We've gotten a lot of recognition from this program. We're a gold winner for IEDC. We are a gold winner for VITA, and also on these publications below. And I think this is the last slide. Hey, it is. So feel free to reach out to myself, Adriana, or Michael if you have any questions. And then I think we are moving into our next.
Before we do that, I think we have time for a couple of questions.
Yeah, I mean, there was enough said and shown that it would be great before we get to the panel to have a few questions.
Yeah,
Maybe.
sure.
Does anybody have? I do. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead. But I like to give it up to somebody else.
It's your last chance. Go for
So,
it.
yeah, right. So I'm actually quite curious about the international outreach and how, I mean, you've got 60 different countries, I think it's 60 countries that we're connected with or that we've reached out to. Do we have, are you just selling Arlington? Is there a vision that you are putting out there for these different country representatives for what we're trying to make Arlington? Because when I look at the key industries, they kind of all over the place in a way. You got associates and nonprofits, but then you got tech. So
No, that's a very good question. So right now we have over 20 connections with countries, but 60 new connections like stakeholders. Let's say with Germany, we have Berlin Partners, the delegation of Germany Industry and Commerce, and the Embassy of Germany in Washington, DC. So that is like 3 partners in like with one country. So there's several partners that we are having in different locations. The vision is we are positioning Arlington as a very strong tech hub. And so we are attracting tech companies, but especially in our main industries, so aerospace and defense and cybersecurity and advanced computing, so AI, machine learning. That is really like our target. Then if we launch the Tech Launchpad in January, and we have application from a fintech company, although it's not our main industry, we consider it's an important industry to discover. And if we see the company has an opportunity to grow in Arlington, we will accept that company to have an engagement. And so in the Tech Launchpad, we will start offering virtual business engagement, the first one happening on February 26th. In May, we are offering immersion program, bringing companies for a 3-day period to Arlington. And hopefully, that's something that we would like to have at some point, is a landing pad to bring some companies for 3 months. So that's a vision that we have, but really positioning Arlington a tech hub, one of the leading tech hubs of the US, and a really friendly place. I think that when we communicate with companies and stakeholders outside, they are looking to have a trusting partner, someone that is not just an institution, but someone in which they find a person that they can connect, build a relationship, and that opens the door for business. So we are really looking into nurturing those relationships, going to events, communicating with them, facilitating if we can. Sometimes we don't even are like, I'm gonna give an example. In Select USA last year, I met a company that wanted to do a business with Argentina. And there was like a great opportunity for the UK company. And because the company achieved that connection, now the company really wants to collaborate with Arlington. So at some point we said, as much as possible, we want to be friendly. We want to be open doors and make sure that they understand that diversity here drives innovation.
So that's exactly what my next question was going to be. So I'm happy that you actually said that you are a facilitator of connection between companies and potentially countries, businesses in different countries.
Exactly. That's what we are trying to do. And also in our events, we're trying to bring different sectors and actors. So at the Genetech event, a Canadian company that is in Roslyn, we brought the Inter-American Development Bank, the person that is running the cybersecurity. And that company right now wants to explore collaboration maybe with GMU, wants to explore collaboration with our cybersecurity initiatives. We are thinking to do maybe a DCA live engagement with them. And so we also brought like some VCs that are considering investing in one of the companies they met at the engagement. So we want to make sure that we bring everyone together and foster and facilitate partnerships for mutual benefit.
And a rare question from Scott.
Actually, a comment and a nice one. I think I'm getting soft for 7 years. But one thing that I really noticed, first off, thank you. One thing I really noticed out of your presentation that I liked was the emphasis on retention and expansion and really having that at the level of attraction. You know, I think if you go back historically, and you kind of nodded to this, that it was yeah, we do that, but it wasn't as sexy as the ribbon cutting of the new and the big announcement with the governor and all that. But the reality is you looked at some of the numbers you put out about business expansion, and square feet are square feet and jobs are jobs. And if you think about it, it got less attention than some of our more novel building repositioning and development recommendations. But in the recommendations that EDC made on commercial space last year, we talked about investing in businesses that could grow and take on more office space in Arlington. And I'm so excited to see y'all are doing that. So please keep up that good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there time for a question?
A question about, I saw nonprofits and associations on there. So are those, do you specifically focus on like tech-based ones or what is your foray into the nonprofit world? Just speaking.
Sure.
Friends one.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I think a lot of it right now is more on retention and expansion efforts. We haven't seen like a lot of pipeline of like ones looking to relocate. Will help anybody. But I think it hasn't been as big a focus. A lot of nonprofits and associations have been cutting down on square feet to minimize overhead, which looks really good for their auditors. So it's not really, it's less of an attraction, but more about retaining like the dynamic assets we have here.
Great presentation. Given our conversations in this group around CMRI and the challenges ahead for commercial space generally, has the group considered like a concierge for development services, right? So you guys are focused on industries, but have you guys considered like when someone wants to come in and they're like, hey, how do I navigate this redevelopment or this adaptive reuse? Like who within AED takes that call?
Can you repeat the question?
He was so ready for Kate to do it.
It's a real estate development group.
Oh,
So it is
okay,
actually
so not,
Mark McCulley,
okay.
but we will work across divisions to do that.
Okay.
So it is, I think what you're describing as a concierge, yes, call AED if you were trying to work through a project.
Okay.
In Arlington,
And
for
that's
sure.
smart. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Almost like Biz Launch, how they help people navigate
Correct.
starting.
Okay.
That's right.
And then there's,
That's right.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
what Mark does.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
We have time for one.
What's your question?
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the National Landing Innovation Zone? Is it more like, are there incentives from like an infrastructure perspective, like something like 5G, or is it more financial? I've always kind of struggled with exactly what does it mean from a kind of a tangible perspective.
Sure. That's a great question. I think we're proud and excited that National Landing is often thought of as an innovation district. In reality, no such thing exists. So that's part of why you don't know what it is, because it isn't there. However, we are doing a lot of work internally and in collaboration with the National Landing Bid and the city of Alexandria to bring such a thing into existence. What exactly that'll look like in terms of like, is it financial, is it development, is it kind of special access to the, redundant dark fiber underneath? Like, I think all of that is to be determined. But definitely, would like any input you have on that.
Yeah, and I'll just add next step. We've engaged with a really globally recognized company that's helping us kind of develop what a future innovation district could look like. And we are kind of moving towards the idea that we would need probably a standalone organization that would help to both market the area as an innovation hub, but also run some programming that that exists but doesn't exist centrally. And so what I mean by that is running programs like to bring entrepreneurs together, to do a startup community program building and things like that, because it help work to attract those accelerators into National Landing. And so it's still very much in the early stages, and we're just going to get our report this month from the consultant on their kind of initial thinking on what that framework could look like. But we've kind of been moving in this direction because we feel that it's not really the responsibility solely of the bid. We don't have the capacity to do it on our own, and we think there should be some buy-in from stakeholders in that community, both current and future. And so we're kind of continuing to explore that idea.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have any additional thought?
No, I don't. I mean, I've heard about it in the past. It's an idea, but it doesn't, it doesn't really seem to shaped up formed yet.
Anybody else? Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, I just have one question. Thinking about both the Fuse and Virginia Tech, there's obviously in the future going to be hopefully a tremendous number of kind of businesses rolling through there and rolling out and growing. Are you guys getting ahead with like landlord inventory, a pipeline, like a pathway for these very overwhelmed young companies, working with Virginia Tech and the Fuse to be in front of them, have a space there, be like a direct conduit? So when people flow out of those businesses or flow out of those spaces, they flow into Arlington, commercial space. Just wondering how you're thinking about that. It's obviously a year or two out, but it feels like there's a good runway you could build now.
Sure. Well, I mean, we work with our local brokers and building owners on a regular basis already, and have a really good sense of what's out there, what's available. So I think it would, your suggestion will actually dovetail really nicely into kind of the services and the business intel we provide to all businesses. And I think, we definitely have those relationships with Fuse and Virginia Tech Innovation to really make sure that we're getting in front of them and getting an opportunity to help them stay here. So that's a great idea.
And maybe complementing very quickly. So with the Fuse building, George Mason, we work very closely. And so every time we have a delegation coming to Arlington, we make sure they visit GMU and other anchor hubs. So maybe a month ago or a month and a half, the Minister of Economy of Armenia went there, and I know they are exploring a cooperation agreement. So there's kind of those type of things that happen. And we are also in conversation with some of the entrepreneurs that are at the Fuse building. So we want to make sure that we do complementary efforts. So they benefit from the Fuse building, but also from the entire ecosystem. And Virginia Tech is playing an important role into that innovation and National Landing Hub, exploring that innovation district. So we are very much engaged and in cooperation with them.
Andy, one thing I'll just add to that is we've also used the Arlington Innovation Fund dollars to do joint programming, particularly with Mason. And of course, Paula's not here today for me to take credit for that, so we can email her and let her know. But that's another gateway for us to be in front of the companies by helping to run some co-run programming there, and we're always kind of continuing to explore what works best in that realm, like what program or activity can we be contributing to help our team get in front of those companies and build those relationships.
That sounds great. I think there's gonna be such a concentration that we've never had before in those two spaces, that just making sure we're in front of it as much as possible.
And we have the benefit of having the space,
Right.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, they don't have it in Alexandria,
Mhm.
and we can keep them in Virginia.
So flow them into Arlington.
Yeah, right. Agreed.
We have one more, time for one more question, Steve.
Appreciate the optimism in what remains a challenging landscape, right? We have no choice. And maybe this bleeds into the commercial vacancy group topic, but if we are assessing risk out there in terms of, the next 3 to 5 years, have you guys looked much at what the potential impact is from the change of administration and the Department of Government Efficiency is on some of the key metrics that you analyzed?
Sure. You were looking at me.
Go ahead.
For me to answer.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'll jump in.
So, I think the short answer is at this specific moment, it's a little too early to know exactly. I think, regardless of whatever administration, every 4 years, like an administration has a strong POV on what they want to do in Washington. And sometimes it comes to fruition, sometimes it doesn't. So I'll start with that caveat. As far as what we've done internally, we've done probably the level of preparation we need to, just double checking like what exactly our GSA inventory is. And kind of who those departments and agencies and offices are. So that way, if we do see them in the news, we can kind of be a little more attuned to them specifically. We have a lot, not surprisingly, our largest GSA tenant is the Department of Defense. And we are reasonably optimistic that that is not a department that would be easy to move farther away from the Pentagon. As well as some of our other, and we have some others like DARPA as well. I mean, their building costs like a ton of money to build. So even though they're leasing it, like it would be incredibly expensive to reinvent that somewhere else. But also, there's some smaller tenants as well, like State Department leases a lot of space in Rosslyn and, feel good about that one. And, we're keeping tabs, but that's kind of the level that we've done so far.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, Adriana and Brandon, thank you very much for your presentation. Panel,
I think Allie's going to take it over.
you're going to take it over, Tally?
Yes. How much time do we have?
We have 30 minutes.
Okay.
Or less.
Do you want to come? Special chairs coming in to us.
But now.
Look at this.
Yeah, they were. Giving. I get so pissed about your emails. I just use so much feedback. It's like I got a little price.
Anything else for them?
I think it's. All right, we're gonna get started with the panel. If you guys can take your seats for a second.
All right, well, Tally, please take it away.
Well, thank you so much. I'm Tally Wolf. I am the Startup Ecosystem Manager. I joined AED just about a year ago. So I'm probably not a new face to many of you, but it's great to meet all of you. My role, so I'm new to AED. My role is also new to AED, and it represents kind of our reshifting and focus of, we used to look at startups within tech and kind of group that all in together. And now we're recognizing kind of there's a lot of unique needs, which we'll hear about from Ian, that startups require in order to be successful. And we want to create an environment here in Arlington where startups can thrive and really attract a lot of that energy and economic vitality and innovation that startups bring. So with that, I would like to introduce our panelists. We were going to have two today, but one of our panelists, Wael from Unstuck Labs, is on the side of the road with a flat tire, unfortunately. But the great news is Ian actually, so at another point, you'll have to meet Wael from Unstuck Labs. I can kind of pepper in some things that I know about the work that they're doing because we funded some of that. But the great thing is, Ian, actually, I wanted to bring in two panelists that represent both sides of the Arlington Innovation Fund. As you know, there's one side is the Catalyst grants, which are our non-dilutive grants to startup founders. The other side is our ecosystem support fund. And that is what is kind of creating a lot of the wraparound support in the programming that Ryan was mentioning that is really critical to the startup space. But the great thing is Ian actually represents both sides of that because we funded him as through the Catalyst side, and then he's an incredible leader in the startup community. And we've also funded him through the ecosystem side. So he can speak for both sides, which is great. So with that, I will actually turn it over to you, Ian, to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your company.
Awesome. Well, appreciate it. Great to meet everyone. I'm Ian Garrett, co-founder and CEO of Phalanx. We're a cybersecurity startup focused on enabling small businesses with secure document transfers. And on the ecosystem side, I run a founder meetup called CrowdFuel. It's really designed as a casual space for founders to come together to share their experiences, lessons learned, and build relationships with each other.
Awesome. And so we will try and do 20 minutes of facilitated Q&A, the two of us, and then we'll leave 10 minutes for Q&A. I know you have a lot of questions, so I may try and give you a little bit more time if we kind of come to the end of my questions. So we will kick it off with the why Arlington question. You know, what made you choose Arlington as the right location for Phalanx?
Yes, so Arlington, as everyone knows, is a great hub of not just, you don't see just government, you don't see just big tech, you don't see just defense contractors, but you have really a collection of all these different industry types. So as a cybersecurity startup, not only do we have easy access to a lot of the innovation and a lot of the policy that's coming out, but we also have access to a number of organizations also doing cybersecurity innovation at multiple levels, but then also the need for cybersecurity, whether that's in healthcare, finance. We have large organizations in Arlington that represent across all these industries.
And can you speak to, we were talking about George Mason and Virginia Tech. Are there pieces related to talent or kind of innovation that also that you're engaging with or have attracted you here?
Yes, so having all those great universities located here, it's really easy to bring on interns or as we're interviewing for special technical talent. The only thing is we have to fight them away from companies like Amazon, but for orgs that or for students that like working with smaller organizations, which there are plenty, it's outstanding.
Awesome. And can you, so I mentioned that we've collaborated before, but how has collaboration with local government helped Phalanx achieve its goals? And in what ways has partnering benefited you both strategically and operationally?
Yeah, so the biggest is connections. The biggest struggle, the biggest struggle you hear a startup ever say is funding. So, but second biggest struggle is related to customer acquisition. And so being able to partner with the local government and really it helps facilitate getting those conversations in a way that if it's just me, Ian, walking up to business, they're like, we couldn't care less. But if there's a warm intro to start that conversation, it's a game changer.
Awesome. And I want to speak or mention about Unstuck Labs. They have, the way that we've been partnering with them is, and actually I'll describe a little bit about what they do, but they are both a kind of startup studio and digital agency, and they support very early stage startups. And one of the critical assets they've brought to the Arlington community is Unstuck Tuesdays. And we send a lot of startups there who kind of have the idea on the back of the napkin and need to better understand, Unstuck Labs will tell them, go out and interview 50 customers to understand and debunk, validate or invalidate those hypotheses. You need to figure out product market fit. And so they arm them with the frameworks and the structure that they need and really hold them accountable too. And CrowdFuel and Unstuck have had some collaboration too. The last two CrowdFuels ago, I think you hosted at Unstuck Space. So they also provide a great space for startups and partner with a lot of startup groups in the area. So next question, what are some of the common challenges that startups face? and what kinds of support or strategies are needed. And you can feel free to speak to your own experience, and please share what's been successful.
Yeah, so already kind of hit on it a little bit, but number one is always finances, always funding. And that's pretty common from what obviously our experience, but talking to a bunch of founders, especially in the founder community, it's always a fund focus. And that comes across a couple different ways. So if you're venture backed or you want to take on external investment like Phalanx did, the initial struggle that a lot of founders have that I've talked to is that they don't understand what does that even mean? How do you go about it? How do they need to structure their organization? Can you do it with an LLC? Do you have to be a C Corp? And just so there's a knowledge gap for a lot of founders to even get that external investment. And then the other side of it is honestly driven by a lot of fear that, you hear all these horror stories of, oh, they're going to, VCs are going to take your company and yada, yada. Which, talking to VCs, they're like, that's counter to our model. We would never do that. So one is just the education and the access to venture capitalists. So for us, I was in the Army as an Army cyber officer, transitioned out into defense contracting. I had zero startup experience, zero startup network. But then we went through the Techstars New York City program, and that's pretty much opened the world to us from a VC perspective. Not every founder is that fortunate. A lot of them are coming out of the government or the military. They just don't have the network to make it happen. And then so the other side of it is grants focus. So again, we're very fortunate to have been a part of the Catalyst grant. It's been huge for us as an accelerant. But it's hard to come by. They're not. But even harder is knowing what's out there. So that's why the various communities and networks for founders in the area to just say, hey, you fit these qualifications for this grant, or pitch competition or any other funding mechanism. But I think honestly, what's most important is the third category, which is just doing business. So customer acquisition. When it's consumer type organizations, that's a little bit easier barrier to entry to at least get started. But what we found is there's a lot of really cool tech companies in the area solving really hard problems, and the kind of customers that they would target are either enterprise customers or large mid-sized customers, and those are not easy to get started. Not to mention there's a number of initial things that your company has to meet minimum qualifications wise to even get in the door. And then beyond that is how do we even get a conversation? So I would say a lot of the startups that I've talked to that are selling to enterprise, if there's any kind of like pilot program connection to take a bunch of large scale enterprise, have them, drum up a bunch of issues that they're currently trying to solve, have a pool of startups, and if there's some sort of facilitator in between to at least start a pilot program so that the startups can gain information about customer acquisition and customer discovery, and these large enterprises have access to the latest technology advancements.
This is why we love Ian, because he comes to us with ideas already baked. So thank you for sharing that. And is there anything from the kind of ecosystem, your crowd fuel hat, that you might add in terms of challenges that you see other startups maybe in other industries facing and kind of what they're looking for?
Yeah, the biggest from the ecosystem standpoint is it's, at least talking to the founders, it sounds like it's still very or not very cohesive. So there's there's Crowdfuel here, there's Unstuck over there. They hear of a bunch of different organizations that can help, but at the end of the day, they still feel like it's not. There's no one easy hub to know where do I go to get help with a certain thing, because each organization has pros and cons essentially.
Yeah.
And again, really coming from the knowledge gap, because no matter what the person's background was starting their startup, even if they've had multiple startups, there's always a small gap between what they're doing now and what they need to do to get it done. So I would say if there's any kind of centralized hub to then push people out to the various organizations, whether it's nonprofits, whether it's like Lighthouse Labs down in Richmond or anywhere else to be able to support these founders.
And that's a common refrain that we kind of hear around this area. And our team has been working hard to build relationships with other municipalities and EDAs, and doing a lot more of the cross-pollination so that we're aware of all of the kind of opportunities that are available so we can better send people or collaborate. So for instance, we hosted a day of Startup Week here in October, which was exciting to bring a crowd that's typically concentrated in the district over to Arlington to National Landing to showcase a lot of the work that's happening there. So we're really trying to do a lot more to understand what are the assets regionally, so that we can collaborate better and leverage those. So thank you for bringing that up. So then specifically thinking about Arlington, I know you mentioned some good ideas there. What initiatives or investments should Arlington focus on to help grow the local startup ecosystem?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that's missing, I would say, is, and I've seen it across a couple different resources, but truly a co-working space that founders can reliably go to. So speaking from our experience, we were all founders focused in Arlington, and a lot of the business we did started in Arlington. We didn't have any kind of physical location to start outside of our condos. So if we had any kind of business meetings when people were flying in, it would be meeting at local coffee shops. Like if VCs were coming in, it was like I would say, hey, there's Compass Coffee down the street. Let's next to the DARPA building. Or if we're running any other kind of meetings, we would go to the library and rent out a room there. But and then so on the one hand, yes, we could have done an Industrious or WeWork, but at the end of the day, those costs aren't nothing for a startup that doesn't have a ton of resources. And when those resources could instead go towards potential customer acquisition between that and paying for conference room space, we'd rather try to acquire more customers to then have a more permanent space. So if there's any, and then the other part of it is going back to the knowledge gap. So if there was any kind of like permanent co-working space, or even if it wasn't every day, but a couple of days out of the week that, a startup knows that they can go and work out of, that has dedicated, conferencing space for any kind of, on the spot meetings that they have. And most importantly, the ability to connect with each other to understand, maybe, I have a lot of technical skills, but my knowledge gaps in sales and somebody else has enterprise sales experience, at least to be able to cross-pollinate in that perspective. Because again, every founder has to do everything, but it's impossible to know everything. So the more you can have an ecosystem that, starts with a physical ecosystem, I think that'd be super helpful for startups.
Yeah, and similarly, that's something that we've heard a lot too, especially coming out of COVID and this desire to have those organic connections. So something that we continue to hear. How would you say that Arlington is performing in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the startup ecosystem? What have you seen be successful, and what are areas for growth and opportunities for change?
Yeah, actually, what I really like about Arlington's ecosystem is that it's so diverse. Having been a part of a couple different startup communities and accelerators across the country, I will say it's not always that way. There's a lot of areas we've been part of where it'll be just all uniform for the founding team, for the founding employees. But for Arlington, what I like is that we don't have to go out of our way to try to figure out, is our team diverse enough? If we're just sourcing from the local community, it's generally a more diverse population, which is outstanding.
Awesome. And thinking about Arlington's future, how do you envision the future of Arlington's startup ecosystem evolving?
Yeah, so I mean, it again starts with the large enterprise, it starts with government, and it trickles up from with the startup ecosystem, but also the small businesses. So again, what I really like about this area is that you have all of that. You wouldn't necessarily, especially with the government and the defense industrial base that supports. That's not necessarily something that you'll see outside of this area. Even if you go a couple counties west of here. You really lose out on a lot of that. But the fact that large enterprises are willing to come here and place their headquarters in Arlington is a huge opportunity that, again, as it starts with those large cornerstones, and the rest of us smaller companies will fill in the spaces. But as they either acquire the smaller companies or we fill in needs that they're not able to quickly adapt to from an internal perspective, I think it really, that's how the ecosystem really grows from there.
Definitely. And this is my last question. Just thinking about, we're about to close out a year and start a new one. What, I guess this is similar to this last question, but thinking about 5 to 10 years out, what sort of things, in thinking about the Arlington startup ecosystem, what sort of things keep you up at night? Worry you? You come from the cybersecurity industry, so I'm sure a lot of things keep you up at night. But and then what sort of things like make you very excited about the future? It gives you a lot of hope.
Yeah, so what keeps me up at night? Well, from a startup's perspective, it's will the startup exist tomorrow? That's always, you're one little mistake away from it potentially just all crashing and burning. But at least from our perspective, that's also where the excitement comes in, because you're also one conversation away from it being, life-changing for your company. But I would say that what's actually really excited about for this area, what I've seen, especially, we founded the company about 4 years ago. So starting, and I worked at a defense contractor actually down the street here before that. So seeing the perspective from the VC side and the investor side of how things are changing in this area, that is actually what I think is really exciting, because when you talk to VCs across the country and other startups across the country, it used to be, you have to, if you were to be taken seriously, you have to be in Silicon Valley, you have to be near those VCs. And then it became, if you want to be taken seriously as a startup, you have to be in either San Francisco or New York, and then it was San Francisco, New York, Boston. And DC has always been a weird asterisk where it's like, it's a large city, but it's generally known as investment dollars that weren't that good, essentially, from a startup perspective. But that's been changing a lot in the last 5 years or so. So I'm really excited to see it not only change for the DC perspective, but as innovations being created in the Arlington area, that not only, people say, oh, we're actually going to move our startup and headquarters down to the DC area, but we're going to Arlington because Arlington specifically has the perfect mixture of investment dollars, customer acquisition opportunities with large scale enterprise, and even government contracting opportunities.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Anne, for painting an inspiring picture for us. And I'd like to open it up to questions from our EDC commissioners.
I have a question to segue in from your government contracting piece of it. What I didn't hear was how often or easy have you found it, or in the community have found it, to access non-dilutive funding through governmental sources, to kind of use that as an opportunity to get the technology mature enough for the commercialization of it?
I actually have a lot of opinions on this. It's been very difficult for us, to be honest. And the biggest challenge, so I'm fairly familiar with the SBIR program, as well as the STTRs, particularly from my experience prior to Phalanx. And the biggest challenge, and you hear a lot of, we're investing in AI, we're investing in cyber, and then so from our perspective, we're like, perfect, we're a veteran, we have cyber experience, there should be at least, relatively, we should be able to navigate the process. There has been a couple of, I'll start with, I guess, the support that we received through a couple accelerators. We actually did one down in Florida, but also the one based out of Richmond and Lighthouse Labs, where they had mentors that were focused in government contracting and in the SBIR program that were able to actually help guide us through the process, even beyond, what we knew, but kind of more behind the scenes, because those mentors just had cyber generating businesses that they, so that for them, then they were able to leverage their resources. So having any kind of ecosystem where the mentor network are already business leaders that can support has been super helpful. And then so on my woes side of the house with the SABRE program, a lot of them, the best way to get a SABRE contract is to have communication with the agency that is putting out it and understanding their pain points. It's not any different from if you're trying to sell to anybody else from that perspective. The challenge is getting those conversations, again, kind of going back to large scale enterprise. It's similar, except for, let's say you're trying to sell to the Army. The Army isn't necessarily buying it, but you go down a couple command levels and that's actually the purchaser. So you need to understand their specific pain points. But even as someone from, who understands that structure, it's very difficult to find the right point of contacts to even start those conversations. And then beyond that, it's hard to actually get a conversation because, again, going back to, hey, it's me, Ian, let's have a conversation. They're like, why would I talk to you, some random guy at a random startup? Whereas if there's a warm introduction to like, hey, this is one of our startups that is at Arlington, they're doing the XYZ cybersecurity. We think based off of, your list of needs that you talked about, that this could be a good conversation for you.
I'm trying to retain that in context. What is SIBRA?
Oh, sorry, SIBR, the SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research. It's a type of government contract designed for small businesses where they'll put out needs, essentially. It varies per department. So like Air Force versus Navy does it pretty differently. But ultimately, they'll have some sort of technology need where they'll have 3 phases. The first phase is more research focused. So let's say, we need to build AI for understanding, where soldiers are across the battlefield if networks are compromised or something. So they'll put out that need, like, hey, we need something. And then a bunch of small businesses will put out white papers for them to read. And then they'll select a few, they'll give them a non-dilutive money to do for a small portion of it. They'll then resubmit a white paper with whatever they did for their phase 1. And the phase 1s can be anywhere between $50K to like $150K or so. The phase 2s are about $1 to $2 million, depending. And that's usually where you build out a prototype and you start deploying it out into the organization. And then the phase 3 is, they're like, hey, this thing works great. Let's deploy it across, whatever organization at however much it costs. So it's a great entry point, in theory, into government contracting to bring innovation and really cool, innovative products into the government. But the big challenge is, it's advertised as very easy for a small business to start. But even if you have any kind of experience, it turns out it's the same problem that startups are having on the commercial side, which is, what is the pain points that I can build to?
Very good answer. Yes, Kate?
Thanks. Ian, thanks for your insight and time this morning. Congratulations on your success so far, and we look forward to more of what's to come. Tally, I have a little bit of a structural question for you. So I'm with the Chamber of Commerce, and we do a lot of referrals to AED at all levels and all departments as well. With the understanding of your role now, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you collaborate with BizLaunch. So typically when we have businesses in the startup stage, we send them all to BizLaunch, but would love to hear, for my benefit, but also my fellow commissioners, how you collaborate together, and also if there's any differentiation on the type of businesses or business questions we should route to you versus those we should route to the BizLaunch team.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we do have kind of a handoff, or there's a process where we do work with the same types of companies, but just at different stages of growth. So BizLaunch is a great place to send very early stage companies that are looking to navigate like how to start a business in Arlington, how to get a business license, all of those things, as well as going through like the lean business model canvas process, customer discovery, product market fit, all of those things. BizLaunch is very good at doing that, the early stages. When a company has made a decision that they are looking to be venture-backed, high growth, like Ian's company, that's when there's a handoff to our team, BIG, where we look to provide different sets of services, whether that's connecting them with accelerators or our university partners. Potentially, if they're getting into the office space At that point, it's usually a little later on. We're working with them too, but a lot of it is navigating those kinds of resources. We're starting to build relationships with investors and that community. So being able to make warm introductions and things like that. Like I said, Biz Launch will focus on more of your small business or kind of brick and mortar Main Street that is looking to grow kind of at more of a regular pace. And they're not looking for kind of that fast growth or high growth tech, but they still do serve a lot of tech businesses. So everything sort of starts at the Biz Launch phase, but it's kind of at that point of deciding what growth trajectory you're on is where determines which team you come to, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it's a little gray, because I'm sure every company would like to be high growth.
Yeah.
But there's some differentiation of what stage they are, maybe where revenue is currently. And it sounds like a little bit sector specific that you're more focused specifically in tech.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Ian, what's your current work from home, office strategy now? Like
yes.
hybrid approach?
So I guess it depends. So we do have space now in the Industrious at the Bolston Exchange. So it depends on, I guess on the meeting schedule, if there's any kind of in-person meetings. There's also, we'll meet with other businesses and startups even in the local area. So if there's any kind of other Arlington-based or DC-based, but honestly, a lot of it happens in Arlington, then we'll definitely be in. Otherwise, yeah, it really depends on the needs for the day and also the needs on if there's any kind of in-person travel, or sometimes I have days where it is just back-to-back virtual meetings for like 10 hours straight at every 30-minute increments. I'll usually stay at the home office for that one just because, get up in the morning and just crank out meeting after meeting. So
you don't have employees in the office on any guaranteed day?
Right. So we're a nationwide remote first company.
Yep.
So we've had people in like Atlanta and Tampa, over in Austin, Texas. So it really is where the talent's at. Mm-hmm. So that's even though the founders are based in the Arlington area, we believe that we want to be able to source talent wherever talent's at. But that being said, as we continue to grow, and we start, and we're always looking to source local too. You just can't beat the camaraderie that you have with just in-person meetings. So from a remote perspective, we're always looking for opportunities to bring people, and we bring them here to Arlington when we do in-person collaborations.
Thanks.
Okay. Great. Very great.
You had mentioned Techstars New York. Was like game changing for you. Yeah. Can you give us like a little insight into like what was game changing about it that we could learn from a little bit?
Yeah. So the Techstars program, it's also similar to if you've ever heard of Y Combinator. They do an initial investment into very early stage companies, often pre-product, pre-revenue. Usually at the idea stage, they'll do an investment and then they run an accelerator program. So for us at the time, I don't know if it's changed now, but it was about $120,000 investment and 3 or 4 month program. But the game changer was one, the programming was really good, where they covered a lot of the initial challenges that a startup would have. So they bring in, they call them entrepreneurs in residence, and then you have also the team that you're working with throughout the time there, and pretty much they'll help you fill in the gaps of, let's say we're really good product people, but our sales and marketing is kind of weak. They'll bring in people to help us on the strategy with that, help us even building out products with that. It's still founder driven in terms of you get out as much as you put in. So if you just showed up and don't do much, you won't really get much. And then the key thing after that was the introductions of VCs. So I would say the 2 to 3 months after we finished program, I had maybe about 20 VC calls a week. It was, and which is like even to this day, still have never reached out to a VC. They've always like found us. So that I attribute that entirely to Techstars, getting us into the pipeline for that, because that is not how the traditional startup founder experience is. Usually it's you reach out to 500 and maybe, 5 will talk to you, and from there, hopefully like 1 maybe will invest. So it was huge for a knowledge standpoint, but also just a legitimacy to be able to be at a point where VCs wanted to talk to us.
Techstars was attaching your name to their brand and then funneling it to VCs for awareness.
Right.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you.
Well, Ian, I can see why Tally brought you up as a speaker today. You've been fantastic, Tally. Thank you very much for moderating that. Let's give them a round. Thank you.
Great meeting, everyone.
Thanks, Victor. Okay, so next step, working groups.
Um,
Scott or Nick?
You want
to give a quick update?
Sure, I would say more from a personnel perspective. As we know, Scott has been very instrumental and really led the charge as it relates to the commercial vacancy group. We hope that he will still participate going forward. So thank you, Scott, for everything. Again, you've done fantastic work in the 1.5 years working with you. And along with that, Matt Weinstein is going to be stepping into the co-chair role with me. So very excited to bring his expertise and experience and knowledge to our group.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, and then moving on, old business. Evan, do you have an update for us on the transportation?
Yeah, just a very brief one. Thanks to everyone who provided feedback on the process of updating Arlington's master transportation plan. The next meeting we have is actually tomorrow night, and we will be discussing. I'll be giving a summary of the feedback the commission provided, and then we'll be hearing all the groups will be briefly reporting out on sort of the themes and big topics they were hearing. That's happening tomorrow night, and I'll just keep updating the commission going forward on how that process goes.
Great. Thank you, Evan. Thank you. So heading into the end of the meeting, we are approaching our send-offs for 2 very important members of the EDC that have reached the end of their tenures. And we have a very special guest, County Board Member Takis Karantonis, to help us with the send-offs. Before we hand it over to Takis, wanted to thank Steve Fedorchak for the wonderful treats.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so I've already had one of these delicious mint cookies.
You're welcome.
Steer yourselves over afterwards.
It's an infomercial for Ian. I'll trade incubation space for equity anytime.
That's perfect. So Takis, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay. So I came in exactly the moment where you were discussing GSA contracts. And that's normally a very, respectful discussion, because we are always aggressive in trying to acquire this, etc. But then we had this fantastic conversation, and I was thinking about if this was a word bubble, what would be the biggest word in there? And I think the biggest word would be ecosystem. And I think sometimes of this commission here as an ecosystem. Why? Number one, you don't have to have gone to business school to know ecosystems are characterized by A, extreme resilience, B, extreme resource efficiency internal, but most importantly, resource efficiency external. That means they are able to expand and acquire and feed and grow in a very sustainable way. So it was when I started my liaisonship with this commission. I knew the commission before, but I had the enormous opportunity to experience this commission from a different perspective as a board member. So from being the advised, the recipient of your advisory work, I got to understand how different this commission is to other commissions, advisory bodies that we have. Because it is an ecosystem, because it is a marketplace of ideas where very different skills, very different perspectives, very different points of view are merged into a very resilient and resource effective mix of outcomes. And we saw that, especially this year. Think about the strategic plan of the department that was shepherded by staff of this department, but of course with this commission. You chaperoned that very nicely. Think about last year and the very advanced work, and I have to recognize Scott about that, the commercial resilience working group has been doing. And the tons of very interesting and thought-provoking and policy-provoking conversations that we had, and also your proposals, some of which were already approved, already adopted, worked through policy, through our policy filters. Others are still out there and we're still working on. But the bottom line is, this was awesome work, very well done. And when we have awesome work, very well done, and we recognize that, we have to recognize the leadership as well. So Bill and Scott, you have produced something here, not only for us as the net beneficiaries of the advisory function of this commission, but for all of Arlington. I was very happy to see how we have evolved from a place that has its economy cut out for us to a place that needs to very actively think how to shape and how to evolve this economy into places that we don't exactly know and for which talent really deeply matters. And this is here, for me, a center of competence. After it is an ecosystem of ideas and abilities, it's a center of competence. And I think that, Bill, you have guided this commission very ably. Thank you so much for that. And Scott as well. There is a little footnote to that. This is the only commission that has something like an executive committee, which is unusual. And you may know that from, nonprofits and other boards. But I think that here, the executive committee, the need to have an executive committee, so kind of a smaller group to coordinate, has to do with the recognition that the outcomes of the commission work really matter a lot. And therefore, there needs somebody to be constantly, gardening this, constantly caring about being efficient and bringing things forward. If I have to thank you for one thing out of the whole thing is having kept this structure very efficiently going. If we look at the appointments that we were honored to make, I cannot find today a group to compare. This is one of the best performing, with the most diverse and really thought-provoking personnel. We are really proud of your work, and thank you for that.
I'm gonna extend this and make sure that Scott and Bill have some time to share their thoughts for their illustrious service.
It's gonna be the first meeting we end late.
Yeah, and I'll take the blame for it, so his record remains sterling. Scott, I'll invite you to go.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Takis. It's funny, thinking about things I could say, kind of wrapping the 7 years, Takis actually took almost all my points.
Right.
Which is terrific. But what I think, looking around this commission, thinking about the arc of this commission across the last 7 years, I've been very impressed at the way we've leaned in as a group to, taking hard questions, asking hard questions, taking hard decisions, making hard recommendations. And I think Takis's point about ecosystems is important, that if Arlington's going to succeed, we all have that role to play to bring that together. And as you go through, it's not a question of what do people want to hear, it's what do people need to hear, and that includes us. But I think, you look at the work we've done in the last couple of years, under Bill's leadership with our working group, to say we have a situation, we're going to throw ideas that may be popular, may not be popular, but let's have that conversation. And we were able to do that without fear of recourse, without worrying what are people going to think, but saying, hey, we're going to ask those questions, we're going to bring it up, and we're going to discuss it. And so my hope is that we continue in that path, because I do think Arlington as a whole is better for the ideas we generate around this table and the advice we can give, not just to the board, but to the whole community. So thank you for the chance to serve with you. And I know you all will keep up the good work. And yes, I will continue on with Nick and Matt's working group. I'd have it no other way.
Scott, thank you. All right, Bill, why don't you bring it home for us?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, on behalf of my colleagues, here's a certificate of appreciation. We should just say appreciation for your service.
We'll let you take it home.
Well, all right. So it has been an honor and a privilege to serve on this commission. I think I've said this several times before. I'll say it again, never more appropriate than right now, that I think the coolest thing, and Takis, you brought it up already, the coolest thing about this particular body is that it draws on experience and professionalism and perspective from such different professions and walks of life. It's diverse in all kinds of different ways that can harness and focus on a particular issue or question. And I think that is so cool to be part of that discussion. Other than Kate Bates, I've watched every one of you start your service on this commission. And I will say, other than just a small handful, I was part of the decision to bring on each of you as commissioners. So I will say that I am extremely proud of what this commission does. I'm most proud of watching you do what you do. I think it's just incredible to see you ask questions and to offer your testimony. And I'm just very happy for that. We've actually gone, I didn't make any comment, and I feel kind of ashamed at the beginning because Kevin had offered incredible testimony toward adaptive reuse to the county board. And your recognition of the importance of adaptive reuse toward, trying to solve towards this commercial office vacancy has been incredible. And that actually resulted in success of the board adopting adaptive reuse and some zoning changes, which is huge. And we deserve, I think, applause. I don't think every community in the country has civilian-led commissions like this that are filled with professionals with lived professional experience that can offer guidance and perspective to staff of departments. So I think it's amazing that you guys get that opportunity to have that. So I appreciate it. And the final point I'll make is that I could not think of a better time for my successor to take on the role, Kevin Yam to take on the role as chair, and Nick Gregorios as the incoming vice chair. You guys are perfectly equipped for the awesome challenge that continues to exist before us. And so I'm proud to have chosen you when you thought that you weren't, veteran enough to be on this commission.
Thank you for your service. And I will just end this and let you gavel out for the last time for really taking EDC and elevating it over your tenure. EDC as a commission has really risen, and we have you and your leadership to thank you for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, guys.
All right. The meeting is adjourned. Congratulations.
Thank you.